with a bit of an eclipse there. The crew is expected to wake up in about 30 minutes. They've been in their sleep period for about 3.5 hours now. Their sleep shift is split today so that they can complete the perigee raise burn in the middle of that sleep shift. That perigee raise burn, or PRB burn, is scheduled to start in about an hour and 33 minutes from now. This is Mission Control Houston. You are continuing to see live views from the Orion spacecraft's solar array wing or SAW cameras. The spacecraft has 4 total solar array wings on the service module. Each solar array is made of 3 panels, and the length of each wing is nearly 23 feet, or about 7 meters long. The 4 solar arrays are used to convert light into electricity, and they can turn on 2 axes to remain aligned with the sun for maximum power. And that view that you're currently seeing from those cameras on the solar array wings, looking back at Earth, a little bit of a crescent Earth in that eclipse. Currently on board the Orion spacecraft, which is named Integrity, is the Artemis II crew. The Artemis II crew is comprised of NASA astronaut and commander Reed Wiseman, NASA astronaut and pilot Victor Glover, and then the mission specialists are NASA astronaut Christina Cook and Canadian Space Agency, or CSA, astronaut Jeremy Hansen. Artemis II is NASA's first crewed test flight in the Artemis program, and that quad of 4 astronauts make up the crew aboard the Orion spacecraft. That crew has been asleep for a little over 3.5 hours now, and they will be woken up in about 15 minutes or so to then prepare for the perigee raise burn, or PRB, operations. And that burn is scheduled to take place in about an hour and 20 minutes from now. The Orion spacecraft lifted off atop the SLS, or Space Launch System rocket, from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida yesterday, April 1st at 5:35 p.m. Central, 6:35 p.m. Eastern. Following launch, the SLS rocket placed the Orion spacecraft into orbit, and the crew completed 2 laps around Earth, checking out the spacecraft while still close to home. Orion then entered a high Earth orbit and separated from the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, or ICPS, and completed the proximity operations demonstration by practicing maneuvers that will be essential for future docking in lunar orbit. The Artemis II mission aboard the Orion spacecraft is designed to help confirm that the Orion systems work and are designed for crew in deep space. Again, the crew is currently asleep, but they will be awoken here shortly, as they will then step into operations to prepare for the perigee raise burn. That perigee raise burn will adjust Orion's perigee, or the lowest point of its orbit, into the correct orbital geometry to set it up for its translunar injection, or TLI burn, which is planned for Flight Day 2. Following the perigee raise burn, the crew will perform a brief checkout of their emergency communications on the Deep Space Network at the most distant point of their high Earth orbit, which is necessary before completing that TLI burn tomorrow. And after that emergency communications checkout is complete, the crew will then resume their sleep period, and they will get another about 4 hours of sleep before they begin their Flight Day 2. This is Mission Control Houston, live in the Artemis Flight Control Room as we continue to provide live continuous coverage of the Artemis 2 mission following the liftoff of the Space Launch System, or SLS, rocket and the Orion spacecraft yesterday, April 1st at 5:35 p.m. Central, 6:35 p.m. Eastern. We're now about 12 hours and 20 minutes into the Artemis 2 mission. The crew is currently asleep, but they are scheduled to be awoken in a little less than 5 minutes from now to prepare for the perigee raise burn. And this burn is an additional engine firing to get Orion into the correct orbital geometry for its translunar injection burn. And that translunar injection burn is scheduled to take place on flight day 2, and that is the last major engine firing of the mission. It will propel Orion on a path towards the moon and set it on its free return trajectory that will ultimately bring the Artemis 2 crew and the Orion spacecraft back to Earth for splashdown. So though it's only 2 days into the mission, the TLI burn essentially doubles as Orion's deorbit burn. After that TLI burn takes place, there will be 3 smaller outbound trajectory correction burns, or OTC burns, that will use Orion's orbital maneuvering system engine, which you can actually see there on your screen. It's that larger engine in the center of the Orion spacecraft service module. And those views that you're seeing on your screen are live views coming from the solar array wing, or SAW, cameras on the Orion spacecraft. So again, those smaller outbound trajectory correction burns will use that OMS, or orbital maneuvering system engine, over the course of the 3 days following the TLI burn, which is scheduled for flight day 2. And so those correction burns ensure that the spacecraft stays on target for its journey around the moon. And then just before the crew goes to sleep on flight day 5, they will enter the lunar sphere of influence, which is when the pull of the moon's gravity will become stronger than the pull of the Earth's gravity. And then on flight day 6, we will have the lunar flyby, which is when the crew will go around the far side of the moon and observe with human eyes the features on that far side of the moon. And it'll also be when they make the closest approach to the moon for this mission. And then after they complete that lunar flyby, they will begin their return back to Earth. Again, we are standing by for that crew wake a couple minutes from now, so that they can then begin preparing for that perigee raise burn. That perigee raise burn is scheduled to take place in about an hour and 9 minutes from now. And this is Mission Control Houston. You just heard the Wake Up song that was played up to the crew. These songs were selected by the crew. They coordinated with the Capcom or capsule communicators for the Artemis 2 mission to select the songs that will play for each of their wake-up periods. So throughout the mission, every time the crew is woken up, you will hear a little clip of a different song each day. And that tradition of wake-up music does date back all the way to the Apollo era. Now that the crew is awake, they are going to step into a brief post-sleep period, and then they will begin preparing for the perigee raise burn, or PRB burn. That burn is scheduled to take place in just under an hour from now, about 59 minutes until that burn ignition start. This is Mission Control Houston from the Artemis Mission Control Room. The crew of the Artemis 2 mission aboard the Orion spacecraft was recently awoken with some wake-up music. They're currently in a brief post-sleep period, and then they will begin preparing for the perigee raise burn. That perigee raise burn is scheduled to take place in about 54 minutes from now. There on your screen in the top left, you can see the Artemis real-time orbital website, and this provides the real-time data and telemetry from the Orion spacecraft when we don't have live views outside of the spacecraft itself. The Orion spacecraft, following a liftoff on top of the Space Launch System, or SLS rocket, yesterday, April 1st at 5:35 p.m. Central, 6:35 p.m. Eastern, is now in a high Earth orbit. It is about 43,000 miles away from Earth. For reference, the International Space Station is in low Earth orbit and is typically about 260 statute miles away from Earth at any given time. In the bottom right hand of your screen, you can see a view of the Artemis Flight Control Room here in Mission Control Houston. Currently on console here in the Artemis Flight Control Room is the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers. Similar to the International Space Station Flight Control Room, the Artemis Flight Control Room will be monitored and manned 24/7. There will be 3 orbits of flight controllers for the duration of the Artemis 2 mission. Those 3 shifts are known as orbits. So the Orbit 1 shift came on console following the ascent of the SLS rocket and the Orion spacecraft, and then they handed over to the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers at about 2:30 a.m. Central, 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And then shortly after the perigee raise burn, or PRB burn, is complete, the Orbit 3 team of flight controllers will come on console and take the crew through the remainder of their sleep period before they enter into Flight Day 2 and prepare for the TLI, or Translunar Injection Burn, which will send Orion and its crew around the moon and back. Again, we are standing by and preparing for that perigee raise burn. That perigee raise burn expected to take place in about 51 minutes from now. This is Mission Control Houston, live from the Artemis Flight Control Room. The Orbit 2 team of flight controllers is currently being led by Flight Director Paul Kanya. The Artemis 2 crew aboard the Orion spacecraft named Integrity is currently awake in a post-sleep period, and then they will begin preparing for the perigee raise burn, or PRB, operations. In preparation for that burn, again, that burn is scheduled to take place in about 41 minutes. There are going to be some star-fueled maneuvers that take place, and these maneuvers are managed by the GNC, or Guidance, Navigation, and Control Officer, here in the Artemis Flight Control Room. This console is responsible for managing inertial measuring units, global positioning system receivers, barometric altimeters, and the position, state, and attitude health of the Orion spacecraft. And they are also responsible for commanding attitude maneuvers. On your screen, you are seeing views from the Artemis Real-Time Orbit website, or AROW, A-R-O-W. And this website is available to the public on nasa.gov, and we will provide views from this data and telemetry site when we don't have live views from the cameras on board the Orion spacecraft. So currently, the Orion spacecraft is about 43,000 miles from Earth and about 223 miles away from the moon. This is following a launch yesterday, April 1st at 5:35 p.m. Central, 6:35 p.m. Eastern. As the spacecraft completes some of those starfield maneuvers in preparation for the perigee raise burn in about 40 minutes from now, the spacecraft is using its guidance, navigation, and control system to complete those maneuvers, and that system on board Orion is responsible for knowing where the spacecraft is and where it is going, and controls the propulsion system to keep Orion pointed in the proper direction and on the correct trajectory. There are several different guidance, navigation, and control systems that can be used on Orion. It does have a star tracker system, and the star tracker operates like a camera, but is very sensitive and takes pictures only of stars. And by comparing the pictures to a known star catalog, the sensor determines spacecraft attitude during orbital operations. Once those starfield maneuvers are complete, there will be some final burn targeting that will take place to ensure that the spacecraft is in the proper attitude. For the perigee raise burn, that final burn targeting is slated to take place in about 8 minutes from now.
Houston Integrity, good morning. We are with you for PRB Ops.
And Integrity and Christina, good morning to y'all as well. Things are progressing well with PRB Ops. We can do a quick tag up here shortly once we get our story ready.
That sounds good. In the meantime, none of us have a PRB burn pad. Is that expected?
That is expected. We are in the process of uplinking a burn pad right now, and the burn pad will be labeled with a version 2. I'll let you know when we think it's on board.
Copy.
And this is Mission Control Houston. You just heard a little bit of communication there on the Orion to Earth loop, and that is the voice link between the ground and the Orion spacecraft. So that was NASA astronaut Christina Cook, who is one of the mission specialists aboard the Orion spacecraft. Again, there are 4 crew members currently living and working on the Orion spacecraft as part of the Artemis II mission. So Christina was speaking directly with the team here in Mission Control Houston, specifically the CAPCOM or capsule communicator, and that flight control position serves as the direct voice link between the crew and the ground. And during that conversation, Christina did ask about a burn pad, and these are plans for each burn that are uplinked to the crew so that they can follow along with the execution steps, and they know exactly what the ground is following along with, and they can also follow along with the same plan. Again, that PRB or perigee raised burn is scheduled to take place in about 34 minutes. And coming up here shortly, the mission control team here in Houston will do their go, no-go poll for that PRB burn.
Houston integrity for cabin temps.
Hey, go ahead, Christina.
Yes, it is very cold in the cabin. Any chance you can make it warmer or reduce the cabin fan speed a bit more so the ventilation is not blowing as hard?
Checking. Yeah, Christina, understand. While y'all were asleep, we did turn one of our knobs that we have, and that was the rad loop set points. And we saw a very small increase in the temperature. And so we're going to take a look at some of these shell heaters, and we'll let you know when we start putting some of that in work, and we can see if that affects the temperature in a positive way.
Thank you, Mike.
Also, Christina, when y'all get a chance up there, we'd appreciate an AGA reading.
Copy. We'll get on that now. Speaking of post-sleep duties, we did check the avatar lights. It was 8 LEDs on in the top row, 7 in the bottom.
Integrity, Huntsville on Orion to Earth 1, we copy for Avatar. That's a good config. Thanks.
And Integrity Houston, the burn pad
copy,
is...
and hello, Huntsville.
The burn pad is now available on the PCDs, should be version 2, and we'll be ready for a conference whenever you are.
We see it, and give us a few.
Whenever you get a moment, can you repeat your last? We missed what you had said about.
This is Mission Control Houston, and you just heard quite a bit of communication between NASA astronaut Christina Cook on board the Orion spacecraft and the Capcom or capsule communicator here in Mission Control Houston. You also heard a little bit of communication with one of the flight controllers at the Huntsville Mission Control Center, and that is in Huntsville, Alabama. That is the Payload Operations Integration Center, and they're typically responsible for managing science payloads. They were talking briefly about the Avatar, and that is a science investigation that is flying as part of the Artemis II mission. Avatar stands for a Virtual Astronaut Tissue Analog Response, and this investigation will use organ-on-a-chip devices, or organ chips, to study the effects of increased radiation and microgravity on human health. Currently, the team here in Mission Control Houston continues to prepare for the perigee raise burn scheduled to take place in about 29 minutes from now. The final targeting for that burn is currently underway.
Ready for the conference. Also, are we go to start our targeting, our final targeting at this time?
All right, Christina, for final targeting, that has just been completed. We had it automated on board. We're taking a look at the results, and the results are good. As for the burn conference, I have no comments for y'all. You do see the yellows on the burn pad, but that was just a delta from version 1, which y'all don't have, so you can disregard the color coding.
Okay, great. We just saw that final targeting come in as well, and the UTC of ground generation in the files we have is April 2, 26, time 10:20.
That's the correct version.
Excellent. Anything else for us in the burn conference?
And nothing else from us, Christina.
All right, with that, we will continue executing.
And this is Mission Control Houston. That conversation there, again, between NASA astronaut Christina Cook and the Capcom or capsule communicator here in Mission Control Houston inside the Artemis Flight Control Room. That was the final burn conference ahead of the PRB or perigee raise burn, and those burn conferences typically take place ahead of any burn during the mission to ensure that the crew on board the Orion spacecraft and the team here in Mission Control Houston are on the same page, and that there are no questions or updates that need to be communicated ahead of those burns. Again, that perigee raise burn is scheduled to take place in about 27 minutes from now.
Integrity, Huntsville on Orion to Earth 1 for Avatar.
Go ahead for Avatar.
Yes, Integrity. Just wanted to get some clarity on which LED was not illuminated. There should be a number underneath or above the LED. Just need to get the number of that LED that is not illuminated.
1-6.
Copy 16-1. Copy 16-1-6. Thank you.
Affirmative, thank you.
And this is Mission Control Houston. Again, you are hearing some additional communication between the crew on board the Orion spacecraft. That Orion spacecraft was named Integrity by the crew, so you will often hear the teams on the ground calling up to Orion. They will refer to it as Integrity, and when the crew on board Orion is calling down, they will typically call down to Houston. During that brief communication, though, the crew, namely NASA astronaut Reed Wiseman, was actually communicating with the Mission Control Center in Huntsville, Alabama, at the Marshall Space Flight Center. That is specifically the Payload Operations Integration Center, and they are responsible for conducting end-to-end mission operations for science payloads specifically. So they were having a brief discussion about one of the science payloads on board the Artemis II mission, known as the Avatar. And the Avatar is, it stands for a virtual astronaut tissue analog response, and it is an investigation that is using organ chips to study the effects of radiation and microgravity on human health. This specific study could provide valuable information for developing measures to protect astronaut health on their journeys, such as personalized medical kits. Again, the crew and the team here in Mission Control Houston continue to prepare for the upcoming perigee raise burn. That perigee raise burn is scheduled to take place in about 23 minutes. The perigee raise burn will adjust Orion's perigee, or the lowest point of its orbit, into the correct orbital geometry to then set it up for its translunar injection, or TLI burn, which is planned for Flight Day 2. After the perigee raise burn, or PRB burn, is completed in about 23 minutes from now, the crew on board the Orion spacecraft will perform a brief checkout of their emergency communications on the Deep Space Network once they are at the most distant point of their high Earth orbit, which is necessary before that TLI burn. And then after that emergency communications checkout is complete, the crew will then resume their sleep period. Again, their sleep period for today was actually split into two parts, about 4 hours for each part of their sleep period, in order to complete the perigee raise burn that is scheduled for about 22 minutes from now.
Houston, Integrity for burn, pad, and plan deltas.
Go ahead, Christina.
Hey, Mike, two small items. The trim limit on the burn pad is 0.2. On the plan, we see 0.1. And second item, Our burn pad has a predicted EI time. Can you verify we can ignore that for now?
All right, Christina, you can ignore the EI time. We're checking on the term.
Okay, good readback. And with that, our next check with you is for your go, no-go confirmation.
And Christina, Houston is go for the burn.
Integrity copies.
All right, Christina, and you are correct. Trim limit is 0.1.
Copy, thank you.
This is Mission Control Houston, and we do have confirmation that the team here in the Artemis Flight Control team, or in the Artemis Flight Control room, are go for the perigee raise burn. That burn expected to take place in about 20 minutes from now. There was some additional discussion between the Capcom or capsule communicator here in Mission Control and NASA astronaut Christina Cook, currently on board the Orion spacecraft. They were talking about some of the data that is in the burn pad. Again, that is a plan that is uplinked to the crew ahead of any burn to ensure that the crew and the team here on the ground are on the same page about the specifics of that burn. Currently on your screen, you're seeing a look at the Artemis Real-Time Orbit website, or AROW, A-R-O-W. That website is available to the public on nasa.gov throughout the duration of the mission, and we provide those live views here on our continuous coverage feed when we don't have live camera views from the Orion spacecraft itself. But this view provides the live data and telemetry coming from the Orion spacecraft. So currently the Orion spacecraft is about 43,000 miles from Earth, and then it has about 223,000 miles to go until it gets to the moon. Again, this comes following a liftoff yesterday at 5:35 p.m. Central Time, 6:35 p.m. Eastern Time. The Orion spacecraft lifted off atop that SLS, or Space Launch System rocket, from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Since that liftoff, about 13 hours and 14 minutes ago, the crew has completed a proximity operations, or ProxOps demonstration, after the ICPS, or Interim Cryogenic Propulsion System, separated from the Orion spacecraft. The crew on board the Orion spacecraft used the ICPS as a docking target to practice those manual maneuvers. And then a little bit after that was completed, the crew did enter their sleep period. Again, about a 4-hour sleep period before they were awoken about 45 minutes ago to complete the perigee raise burn operations coming up here shortly. This is Mission Control Houston as the Orion spacecraft and its crew, along with the team here in Mission Control Houston inside the Artemis Flight Control Room, continue to prepare for the upcoming perigee raise burn, slated to take place in about 15 minutes from now. The solar array wings on the Orion spacecraft, or the SAS, are now in position for that burn. The Orion spacecraft has 4 total solar array wings on the service module. Each solar array is made of 3 panels, and the length of each wing is nearly 23 feet long, or about 7 meters long. These 4 solar arrays are used to convert light into electricity, and they can turn on 2 axes to remain aligned with the sun for maximum power. And on that visualization there in the center of your screen, you can see those 4 solar array wings on the Orion spacecraft.
Integrity Houston, the solar arrays are in position for the burn.
Integrity copies.
Integrity Houston, less than a minute to the burn attitude maneuver.
Okay, we copy that.
And good morning, Jeremy. And also the tank pressures are good for the burn.
Okay, we copy that.
This is Mission Control Houston, again hearing some continued communication from the crew on board the Orion spacecraft. That Orion spacecraft currently in a high Earth orbit, preparing for its perigee raise burn in about 11 minutes from now. The team here in Mission Control Houston calling up to the crew through the Capcom or capsule communicator position, confirming that the Orion spacecraft is in the correct attitude for that burn. The attitude is the orientation or the pointing direction of the spacecraft. and it is determined by 3 different rotational axes known as pitch, roll, and yaw. And it is important to ensure that the spacecraft is in the correct attitude prior to the upcoming perigee raise burn, but also in preparation for any of the burns.
Integrity Houston, we see y'all in the burn attitude.
we see the same.
This is Mission Control Houston. We are about 5 minutes away from the perigee raise burn. That burn expected to last about 1 minute and 4 seconds. We just heard confirmation from the Capcom or capsule communicator here in Mission Control Houston up to NASA astronaut Christina Cook on board the Orion spacecraft, confirming that the Orion spacecraft is in the correct attitude for the upcoming perigee raise burn. And the spacecraft attitude refers to the orientation or the pointing direction of the spacecraft. And this is Mission Control Houston. We are about 1 minute out from the perigee raise burn. Again, that burn expected to last about 1 minute, and that burn will raise the perigee, or the highest point of Orion's orbit. Apologies. The burn will adjust Orion's perigee, or the lowest point of its orbit, into the correct orbital geometry to set it up for its translunar injection, or TLI burn. Again, that TLI burn is planned for flight day 2. After the perigee raise burn is completed in just a few moments, the crew will then step in to perform a brief checkout of their emergency communications system on the Deep Space Network. After that checkout is complete, they will then prepare for their sleep period, which will then last about another 4 hours. And that perigee raise burn is now underway. And there on your screen, you can see the 8 Pulse-X engines on the Orion spacecraft. Now, this is a visualization of the Orion spacecraft, as we don't currently have live views from the spacecraft itself, but this uses the data and telemetry from the spacecraft. Again, this perigee raise burn expected to last about a minute. Currently, everything is proceeding as planned. And we do have confirmation that that burn is complete. It was a good burn.
We're tracking a good burn.
And we see the same, and with a bonus trim burn.
And you just heard confirmation from NASA astronaut Christina Cook and the Capcom, or capsule communicator, here on the ground in Mission Control Houston, that we did have a good perigee raise burn. That burn lasted about 50 seconds using the 8 Pulse-X engines on the Orion spacecraft service module. And there on your screen, you are seeing a live view of the Orion spacecraft from one of its solar array wing cameras, and you can also see another one of the solar array wings on the bottom right hand of your screen from the Orion spacecraft. Again, this live view comes following that perigee raise burn. And there in the distance, now just going off of the screen, we did see a distant view of the moon following that perigee raise burn coming from that solar array wing camera. Again, the Orion spacecraft is currently about 220,000.
Readings when you're ready.
And good morning, Victor. We'll take those readings.
Good morning, Mike. You have CO2 2.8, O2 19.0, 68.1 degrees, 14.55 psi.
All right, Victor, we copy all. Really appreciate it.
Happy to help.
Houston, integrity. We would like to ask you to finish up step 23 of orbit burn execution for us, if that's okay, so we can get position for the EMERCOM check.
Definitely, Christina. We'll take care of the rest of 23.
Thank you.
This is Mission Control Houston. Over the past few minutes, there have been various communications between the crew on board the Orion spacecraft and the team here in Mission Control Houston. One of the first calls we heard was from NASA astronaut Victor Glover, who was reporting some of the AGA, or anomaly gas analyzer readings. The AGA is a portable laser-based instrument that detects trace contaminants aboard Orion.
EMERCOM checkout, just confirm you are handling step 1 of 21.2.8.
And good morning, Reed. Yes, we are taking care of step 1, and in step 2, the antenna will be number 3.
Copy 3.
And this is Mission Control Houston. The crew is now stepping into their emergency communications checkout using the Deep Space Network. The Deep Space Network is...
We're picking up in step 4 of EMERCOM checkout on antenna. Well, we'll get to antenna 3 in a second.
Houston copies.
Again, this is Mission Control Houston. That communication there between NASA astronaut Reed Wiseman and the Capcom, or capsule communicator, here in Mission Control Houston, discussing the emergency communications checkout that is currently taking place. Again, that emergency communications checkout is being done connected to the Deep Space Network. The Deep Space Network is NASA's international array of giant radio antennas that support interplanetary spacecraft missions, plus a few that orbit Earth. And this Deep Space Network also provides radar and radio astronomy observations that improve our understanding of the solar system and the larger universe. During this emergency communications checkout, the crew will perform various voice tests of the emergency communication system using the Deep Space Network. This checkout is being done to ensure that if the Orion spacecraft was to lose communications, they would be able to regain communications from Mission Control Houston using this emergency comm system in the event it lost that communications. But again, that's not expected. This is just one of those checkouts that is being performed on the Orion spacecraft before that translunar injection or TLI burn slated for tomorrow. There were some additional checkouts of the spacecraft completed prior to their initial sleep period earlier today. They tested out some of the cabin configurations, the environmental control life support systems, and some of those checkouts will continue into the flight day 2 ahead of that translunar injection burn, just to ensure that the spacecraft is in a good and steady state ahead of its outbound trip to the moon.
Houston, integrity, end of line, comm checks.
Integrity Houston, I'm calling on OE1. I heard your call down on EMERCOM. We're still configuring uplink. I'm going to attempt to call on EMERCOM on uplink here shortly.
Okay, we are in instruction 26. Do you want us to hold here and leave EMERCOM on? Do not execute 26.
Yes, let's stay here, please. Let's stay here, please.
Hey, Mike, we have you loud and clear on EMERCOM as well.
This is Mission Control Houston, the crew and the team here at Mission Control Houston.
Houston, we have you loud and clear. Okay, copy that. Okay, we're picking up in step 8 of EMERCOM, powering off emergency comm radio.
This is Mission Control Houston, the crew here on the ground, along with the Artemis II crew on board the Orion spacecraft, just completed their EMERCOM or emergency communications checkout using the Deep Space Network, and that checkout was successful on both ends. Again, this is just part of a series of checkouts of various different systems on board the Orion spacecraft ahead of the translunar injection burn. That TLI burn is slated to take place in about 12 hours from now, and that burn will send Orion and its crew outbound toward the moon and back. Now that the emergency communications checkout is complete, the crew will deconfigure that setup, and then they will step into their pre-sleep period before going to sleep for about 4 more hours. Again, their sleep period today was split into 2 4-hour blocks due to the perigee raise burn.
On S-band.
Reed, we have you loud and clear on 1. How many?
We have you the same. We just didn't want to let you go without saying the view out window 3 from about 38,000 nautical miles of the entire half of the Earth is spectacular.
I love to hear that so much, Reed. So glad you guys are getting to experience it. I do have 3 quick questions for y'all before we sign off for the rest of the night.
Go with your 3 quick questions, and then I'll give you one more kind of sit-rep update here.
Fabulous. Can you just give us a quick report on the audio quality for EMERCOM in terms of like clarity and pacing and stuff?
It was crystal clear, maybe a little lower volume, but that might have been my fault because I didn't have the volume all the way up on the F7 EMERCOM panel, but it was outstanding.
All right, excellent. Great to hear, Reed. And then my other question is about the cabin temperature. We did raise the shell heaters. It looks like it's gone up a couple of degrees in there. Hopefully that's a little better. The question is, was the coldness more just from the cold air directly coming from the vents, or would you say it was just a general cabin temperature?
I'd say it is both. The general cabin temperature is low, and then the spacecraft over by the toilet and the side hatch is noticeably colder than the side over by the PWD and the food warmer. It's high airflow volume and just cold air.
All right, Reed, thanks for the report. And my last one is actually more of a comment than a question. I know we were having a little trouble with the handheld mics and y'all's volume coming down to us. Just wanted to be clear how the mic is set up. It sort of has a front and a back. They look the same, but the microphone side, just under the top of the mic, will have a little black raised nub that you can feel and maybe particularly see. That is the microphone side of the mic. You flip it over 180, it looks the same, but that is the noise canceling side of the mic. So just ensure that you're talking into that side for that.
And that is a great note. We've adjusted by how we hold the mic. I do confirm we are speaking into the mic side. And how has the volume been on this operation? Just by how we hold the mic. I do confirm we are speaking into the mic side. And how has the volume been on this operation?
Great.
Ever since y'all have been awake for this PRB ops, it's been loud and clear. We have no concerns.
That's great. We'll keep with how we're holding it. Speaking of the temperatures, we are going to retrieve our crew suitcases so we can get long sleeves on. We have been using the ones that we have out so far. We're into one of the E lockers. Can you let us know where all of the crew suitcases are? All they say on ours are D and E, and we're wondering if we should open both sides or not.
All right, we're checking.
And Mike, we found Glover Hansen in the E locker so far. So I'm guessing we are going to have to get into D, but let us know. Perhaps it's just on the other side of E.
All right, and yes, got confirmation down here. We do expect you to go into locker D Delta to get the other suitcases.
Okay, we copy that, Mike. And if you have maybe 2 minutes, I'd like to just talk about some photography operations that might feed into the science team.
We do have those 2 minutes, Reed. Let's go.
We're noticing on the GoPros, on video in particular, it's very hard to get the gains to come down. Everything is just very white, bright, and washed out. The iPhones, you have to manually go in and bring the gain down, and even at that, it's very difficult. It's like walking out back at your house and trying to take a picture of the moon. That's what it feels like right now, trying to take a picture of Earth. On the D5 with the window shroud and window 3, D5, long lens, window shroud on window 3. Very easy to maneuver. We're using a 3-frame bracket, and we're getting some outstanding pictures of the Earth. They seem to be pretty crisp, even at 400 millimeters. So on a good first hack, the window shroud with the long lens is a very workable solution. But the more modern cameras are definitely having trouble gaining themselves down. Maybe there's some ideas that can be come up with in the next day or two to help us out on that. That's it.
All right, Reed, we copy all. Appreciate the input there. We'll go take a look at it and see if we can come up with something for you. In addition, we are going to go ahead and lower the cabin fan speed by another 1,000 RPMs, and hopefully this helps with it, and we can reassess in the next morning.
Okay, that sounds good. Can you look, do you have the either the ISS tracker, do you have the world map up in there, and can you tell me, the sun is set just west of a continent. I can't tell what continent it is, whether it's South America or Africa.
So Reed, we're expecting that sunset that you're seeing right now should be right on the Indian continent in India.
Yeah, I just wanted to describe for you guys the beauty that we're seeing. You can actually make out the coastline of the continent. You can make out rivers because of the sun glare. You can see high thunderclouds, and all the while you can see the entire terminator, and you can see the South Pole lit up. It's just phenomenal. And even from this far, you can make out a slight pink hue along the terminator. It is just absolutely phenomenal. You guys look great.
All right, thanks, Christina. Glad it's looking great for you all.
And I'm glad we got to do some comm checks with you for real, Mike.
I know, I wouldn't miss it for anything else in this mission, so I made sure, Dr. Love here, I got this emercom shift just for this.
This is Mission Control Houston. We just heard quite a bit of communication there between NASA astronaut Christina Cook, currently on board the Orion spacecraft as part of NASA's Artemis II mission.
Overnight support there. We really appreciate it. It's been a good first, well, it's been 2 orbits of Earth, I guess, and this one's just got a 38,000-mile apogee. We're going to pick up in 26-1-100 pre-sleep checklist, and then we're going to dim the cabin down and get some rest. Thanks for your support.
Yes, great PRB day. Excellent flight day 1, y'all. Get some good rest, and we'll be in touch in a couple hours.
All right, sounds good. Cheers.
Again, this is Mission Control Houston. Again, that chatter between both NASA astronauts Christina Cook and then NASA astronaut Reed Wiseman, currently on board the Orion spacecraft as part of the Artemis II mission. The Orion spacecraft recently completed a perigee raise burn, and then they completed an emergency communications checkout, and now they are preparing to go back to sleep for a few hours before they prepare to enter Flight Day 2. But during some of that communication, they were talking about the cabin temperature inside the Orion spacecraft, requesting that the temperature be increased if possible. And then they were also discussing some of the views that they are seeing from the windows of the Orion spacecraft, particularly looking back on Earth. It sounds like the view from the Orion spacecraft, about 43,000 miles away from Earth, is quite spectacular, in the words of NASA astronaut Christina Cook. In regard to the cabin temperature, that is being worked by the EECOM position here in Mission Control Houston. That stands for Emergency Environmental and Consumables Manager, and they are responsible for the internal thermal control systems, air and water supply, and purification system, and they also manage emergency response. The equivalent of this flight control position in the International Space Station Flight Control Room is known as ethos. Again, on your screen, you are seeing views from the Artemis Real-Time Orbital website, or AROW. These views are provided when we do not have live views from the Orion spacecraft cameras itself, but it uses the data and telemetry.
Go ahead.
Hey, Mike, I just commanded the ARS state to sleep. I just want to let you know, in case you guys are doing some manual commanding on those fan speeds, I might have just overridden you with that.
No, Reed, we were anticipating you setting the ARS to sleep, so it did not affect the fan. And one last question for you. Is there anything that you want to report to the AMMT before you'll go to bed?
On the technical side, Mike, I'm sure you all are covering it down there. We are getting a lot of SM prop system cautions. We also see on string 2, the string 1 and string 2, some cyan data on the oxidizer pressure, and for a little while overnight I saw the same on the fuel pressure on string 2, manifold 2. Right now, manifold 4. Fuel pressure is missing. So we are just seeing some nuances there. That's interesting. We've gotten those CMUS 300 cautions, but I think those are just due to the wrong settings in the system. And other than that, we got a few things. Integrity on 1 contact.
Reed, got you loud and clear. Sorry about that. We were just going through a data rate change. Snuck up on us. I copied all the way. You were talking about the cautions, and then I said, other than that, we've got a few things, and then that's where you cut off.
Okay, just looking over the SM prop system, there's some missing data from time to time on string 1 and string 2 manifolds on the pressure side, and we see that kind of shifts across different manifolds overnight. And right now, manifold 2 and 4, actually 5, 2, 4, and 5 all show either missing oxidizer pressure or fuel pressure. We've just been watching that. And then cabin temperature is probably the biggest one impacting crew habitability right now. And but honestly, a few other things we would talk to Jeff about on ascent and just some post-MECO items, but none that would be a lean against the AMMT.
All right, copy all, Reed. And for the cyan that you're seeing on the manifolds, it is tied to these cautions that come up. And so this is why you can see 2, 4, and 5 are cyan, because we've got cautions and alarm with 2, 4, and 5. The data changes a bit when the cautions come in. So we're working on that to get that changed.
All right, Mike, sounds great.
All right, Reed, that's all we have. Y'all have a great night.
You as well.